And you're up. All right. So no thoughts on that? Get this. I put my papers backwards and that just totally throws me off. I had just maybe like one or a couple of takeaways from that. So when you look at something like this, God's given us a behind the scenes look at something that's happened in the past. And that's something behind the scenes, I mean, behind the physical scenes and what God's doing, right? And behind the scenes. So we see what God's doing to bring the whole world to get ready for Jesus. And that's what he's doing with this. That's the ultimate goal of this. Because who is Jesus? He's the King of Kings. That's this kingdom that we just saw. That's Jesus is the king of that. All the way up to now and then in eternity.
Just notice that in the background, while this is going on, the books are open, the people are seated, meetings are seated. In the background, the horn is still blaring out. So there's still background noise, just like today. Gospel is preached, but there's all this background noise. So the kingdom's been established, we're safe within the kingdom, but they're still behind the scenes. I was looking for the exact phrase. Anyway, I would say right offhand, but so then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the Lord was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain. So that didn't stop the boast. They just kept coming. And I think about today, the gospel is still preached, but those who are against Christ are still clamoring out there and trying to drown out the message.
So how does it feel? Okay, thank you. How does it feel for us living in a time where it seems like things are spiraling out of control? Well, that's been a lot of the history of the world, right? But then we look back and we see this, and it's like, well, no, it really was not spiraling out of control. Just, our limited view of it is that's what it's looking like. But God's really moving things along. And just because we can't see it doesn't mean that that's not happening. So that should be an encouragement. That's an encouragement for me whenever I see that. So it's like, okay, God's doing things. I just can't see it. So how I get through it the way God wants me to. And that's what I get out of this. So Jim, and then I think Michelle had.
Well, one amazing thing is that God has laid out the history for several hundred years in advance. And it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So he's laying out the history hundreds of years in advance. Several empires. Michelle.
And the other part I like is in verse 25, where he's talking about how this king was going against all the Most High and just trying to destroy the Jews and really made it to where they don't want to worship God. But he says in there, it's for a time, times, and a half time. So it is going to come to an end. Just don't forget.
Yeah. We don't have like a specific date, but times and a half a time. So there's a period, and it's going to end. So he's promising that it's going to end, and that's all you really need to know. I'm living in. It's like, okay, God's going to take care of this. It's not going to last forever. Good. Anything else? Okay, then notice one thing that I was looking at, the only real worldwide kingdom that's ever happened is God's kingdom. It's in every nation. And it's like Jesus said, when he's in front of Pilate, it's my kingdom's really not of this world. But it is. It's the whole world. All right, chapter 8. Unless there's anything else that anybody has in this. Okay, let's move on to chapter 8. So the setting is still Babylon, but it's a couple years after this last vision. So God's just giving him these visions. Here we've got the last emperor of Babylon, and in his first year, God gives Daniel this vision that we just read in chapter 7. Now, a couple years later, there's this other vision that we're going to see in chapter 8. But this is still, I think there's another 12 years before Babylon's destroyed. So there's still a few years in between this and the destruction of Babylon, and the Medes and the Persians take over. And it's interesting because he uses this the setting is that, so he's in the third year, the first one there, of the king of the reign of King Belshazzar, and a vision appears to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time, which is a couple years ago. I saw in the vision, and so it happened that I was looking, and that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is a province of Elam. So let's just get ourselves a little so we've got Shushan is, I believe, right in here, because this is the Fertile Crescent, right? And it was like right over in here. It's interesting that so you've got that right in modern day Iran. It's actually like really close to the border between the two. But here's the Medes and the Persians at the time. They're to the east, right? And then you've got the emperor of Babylon. I forget how big it is, but it's something about like that, roughly. And so that's where Daniel saw in his vision where he was. We don't know where he really was. And that gives us a little bit of a background and a setting. So now let's see what Daniel's vision says. So I saw in the vision in verse 2 that so it happened that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there, standing by the river, was a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. So westward, that way, northward, southward. So, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west. So it came from the west, came from over here someplace. He came across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram, and he was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there's no one that can deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in the place of it 4 notable ones came up against the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came a little horn, which is exceedingly great toward the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away. The place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. Then I saw a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices, the transgression of the desolation, and the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, 4,300 days, and the sanctuary will be cleansed. So if you're Daniel and you're reading this, what are you focused on? What is going to pop out in your mind? And if you're Daniel, Rochelle.
The desecration of the temple?
Right? That's you're gonna go, what? But whenever he gets this vision, there's not a temple. Right? So this is gonna be a temple in the future. So which temple is this gonna be, do we think? You got how many to choose from? You've got Solomon's, you've got the rebuilt one after Solomon's, and then you've got the Herod's temple. And we know it's not Solomon's, and it can't, pretty much can't be Herod's temple. So which one's going to be? Is it going to be the rebuilt one? And what do we know of history that follows along with this? You keep hearing this guy, Antiochus Epiphanes, right? And he was the one that desecrated the temple. So it's probably what this is talking about. But it's not a big thing to know. It's just the fact that happened and why it happened. Look at there's these words here that Daniel's going to key in on, and like verse 13. So I heard this holy one speaking, and this is in his vision, and another holy one said to the certain one who was speaking, how long will this vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, of giving both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? So Daniel's got to hear that, and no wonder he's troubled. This is what's coming for his people. And how much he understood and how much he knew, we don't know a lot, because he had been given this vision before, but still, the sanctuary, the daily sacrifices, the sanctuary and the hosts are going to be trampled underfoot. But what's this transgression? And back in verse 12, because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices. So there's something coming because of transgression. This is and who's the transgression by? It's the transgression of the Jewish people, right? It's the only thing I see that could be. But I don't know, what are your thoughts? Now that's kind of what I saw that popped out. Whenever we read through this, how are you making sense of it in your minds? Because you certainly could have seen things that I did wrong. Okay, you're just straightening your shirt. This is sure, you just popped out.
This is really strange. It's very hard to understand.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you take it, and and when you just read through it, you go, oh my goodness, this is, and then you start to break it down and parts it, and it makes more sense once you break it down to its parts, like a lot of complex things are. Because you've got what? And we've only, in the last vision, it had 4 beasts. Right now here, we've only got 2 beasts that are being talked about. So, and you've got this first beast, this ram, doesn't matter what it is, but it had 2 horns. One of these horns is bigger than another. And it's going west, it's going north, it's going south. Which direction is it not going?
So wouldn't that be Cyrus?
Would that be what?
So wouldn't that be King Cyrus at that point?
Eventually, it's King Cyrus. It's the same empire, but King Cyrus is over a changed version of it. But yes. But earlier, so whenever it was the Medes and the Persians, is what this is talking about, because you have 2 horns, Medes and the Persians, right? And you have one horn's bigger than the other. And which horn's bigger? The Persians. Because the Medes are basically just, there's this weird kind of tribalistic, they don't have near as much sophistication and culture as the Persians do. But Bruce, go ahead.
To me, the way that I understand it is the large horns are referring probably to the Medo-Persian Empire, and specifically Alexander the Great. And the small one is referring probably to the Grecian Empire and Epimenides, I think. I'm not sure.
So now wouldn't the male goat be the Grecian Empire though? Because that's the horn that breaks into 4 different horns. So Alexander being the large horn that takes over the immediate, the Persians, it would be the Persians by that time. And then they, how did it say it? Verse 7, I saw him confronting the ram, and he was moved with rage against him, and he attacked the ram and broke his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him to the ground and trampled him. So, at the end of verse 6, I'm reading through it, I'm looking for the passage that the goat came against the ram that had 2 horns, and I saw him standing beside the river and ran at him with furious power. Does that not sound like Alexander the Great? Because how old was he when he died? He was only in his 30s. And he got almost all the way to India, right?
Yeah, he did get it.
Yeah, and so he's down in Egypt, and he started, here's Macedonia over here, and he conquered so much. And by the time he was 30-something, and then that's like a furious expansion of the Grecian, actually Macedonian, let's be more accurate, because of his, that's where he came from. And they were the dominant power at the time. So that was their empire. And then all of a sudden he died. And his kingdom broke up into 4 separate kingdoms. So that's the way I'm making sense of this. And then, so you've got the 4 horns of the goat, or the 1 horn of the goat that breaks up into 4 horns. And then that's verse 8. And then out of verse 9, out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the south, the east, and towards the glorious land, which I'm assuming is Israel. So that So now our focus moves to here. And this is one of those four horns, and the other four horns kind of are going to fall by the wayside because of Rome, right? And that's going to be the one of those four horns that grows and takes over all the rest. Now, the thing about this, and I don't know, maybe you can help me, the language that this vision uses about that horn, and verse 10, it grew up to the host of heaven and cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them, even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. But it says, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So what's going on with this horn? Sorry, Jim, say again.
It says, he's trampling down the religion, the Jewish religion.
Yeah, that's what it did.
Taking away their sacrifices, he's burned Jerusalem, killed multitudes of Jews, and wiped them out.
Yeah, and they can't do their daily sacrifices anymore. Their temple is desecrated, and they're in a pickle. And so this is what Daniel's seeing of the future of his people. So that you can see why he's troubled. And there's one interesting thing there. The verse 12, because of transgression, an army was given over the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. Think of that, the ringing implications of that, casting truth down to the ground. So there's this absolute truth, right? The absolute truth of who Jesus is, or who God is, who his people are, and all that he's done up to this point, and his word, and this horn, the Roman Empire, and the Caesars are casting that all down.
So, to remember a little bit about history is the fact that during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, the little warning made a lot of noise, and he desecrated the temple. A movement arose, the Maccabees, and even they began to pervert. So that we talk about the crime of the Jews goes back to their disobedience with the kings before the exile. They combined both the kingship and the high priesthood in one man, and eventually in one woman. So we start talking about the little horn coming in and casting down. They already cast down the truth. When Pompey came through, he desecrated the altar again, but sided with the Sadducees. And so there was no truth going on at all at this point. So that sin happened during this interlude.
Right, so truth is being cast down by first Antiochus Epiphanes, and then Pompey comes through, and I'm not sure, and that's where my history is not clear, when that temple gets destroyed and when the temple of Herod gets built. I'm not sure the transition of that, so I need to get that down better. But what we see though is that God's people are going to be in very desperate straits, right? This is what Daniel is seeing. And then, their whole culture, their whole spiritualness. And so you could see with this why whenever John the Baptist comes on the scene and Jesus comes on the scene, why his people are so desperate, right, for these promises they know that are in the truth there that are to come about, but they haven't seen them, and they're looking for them, the God's remnant. This is what they're looking for.
So it's actually Herod that tore down the temple to build a more glorious temple. This with the.
Okay, so that's what
The
happened.
king of Rome and the Sadducees, and that's what happened. We talked about, you've heard about the holiday Hanukkah. They celebrate the rededication of the temple during the time of the Maccabees, when they did the cleansing. They went from doing things by the law rapidly into perverting and twisting the law, even back at the interlude period.
Okay. So that's those pieces of history are good to know. So it was Herod actually that tore down the old temple to build a much bigger one, and that was where Hanukkah came about. Was whenever they dedicated the temple
Under Judas Maccabeus.
under the Maccabees.
They
Judas.
cleansed the temple and rededicated the temple.
Okay. They rededicated the temple, and that was Hanukkah that happened to. So, Ron.
So essentially, what we're reading here is that 400 years of silence that came about between Malachi and Jesus coming on the scene. Is that what this is about?
This seems to be setting up that. It's not really saying it, but it's silent about it.
Yeah, hold on. There's I'm hearing about Antiochus Epiphanes and Maccabees and
Yeah, God's
the
not there.
Pharisees actually came out of that period. So that's what we're looking at here without it being written in the text.
Yeah, there's no prophet in that. And he's just quiet. I mean, he's just letting things, and he's doing things, right? But he's just not talking to them. He's got all of this that they've got right at the time is what they have to get them through those 400 years. Right.
And he's the prophecy here is actually leading up to Jesus. Is that what he's?
That's what
Daniel is making reference to this.
I don't know if he in his mind could see, that it's leading towards the Messiah or not. But he's definitely seeing how the kingdoms are going to go. And of course, he has, just what he's been given in this last vision up until this point, because we've got more visions to come after this.
Okay.
So this isn't the end for Daniel, because he's going to have visions later on in the under Darius, and then under Cyrus even after that. So he's going to see more as the political scene and as the empires are unfolding, and God's given Daniel these visions all along. That's just amazing. So now we are out of time, but I want to just real quick talk about these two holy ones and this whole thing about the 2,300 days. Now, I don't know about you, whenever I see something like, and there is, how does it say it? How long is this vision going to be? And he said to me, for 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary should be cleansed. My eyes cross about when something like that is said. Because your math mind goes, okay, so that's on 2,300 days and divided by 365 days, so that's 6.3 years, and that's awful specific. So, Jim.
I have a note. Apparently, when they talk about days like that, they're talking about morning and evening prayer. So you have to divide that by 2. Because every day for them was or every 2 days in one, or whatever.
So if you're looking at it specific like that, so that's even, it makes it harder in my mind, because, okay, is it talking about 24-hour periods, or talking about, days like you're mentioning? But do we really have to think about it like that? Or could we look at it and go, like we were talking about before, the times and a half a time, that it's just a short period of time that's gonna end? Cindy?
But it's twice the time. So it's gonna be a little longer than they expected.
A little longer, but it's still gonna have an end, and it's not gonna be, like decades and seem like forever. It's gonna come to an end, and God's gonna bring it to an end, and you can rely on that. So we'll leave that there, and then next week, we'll pick up with the interpretation. Right? Get that going. These things, boy.
I'm like you, it's like sometimes you read it,
Exactly. So just,
it's a good way to look at it. There's gonna be an end.
it's something.
Exactly. Because like, wait, so 6 years from now?
And how many of the people back then even really, have calendars, have clocks, and,
What's crazy, too, like even now, like when I read it, I find it interpretation, like go through and go out reading your comments, and they'll encourage, and then Alexander, okay, what?
It's hard. I know horns are power.
That's why
names and stuff.
we in trouble.
Exactly.
This is about us, I think, right?
That's part. They're just guys looking at this, right? So what do you do,
But even now, like I said, if you didn't have like something, like maybe now, like whatever. You just gotta go with one more, and then it breaks, and then 4 more, and then one more bigger than the other one, and then, yeah.
You're hoping
Can you just tell me what it is?
So it's like, okay, listen, this guy's coming, and this guy, and he's gonna die, and this guy.
Fortunately, the interpretation is a little bit better.
Yes.
On the chapter.
I know it already happened and we're fine.
Exactly, right? We're in this.
Do you need my
this eternal
PowerPoint?
kingdom. Yes, please.
Okay, there it is.
Awesome, thank you.
I think there's only